For Chapter 3, if we go back to our table of contents, this is really where the Metro 2 format is, as a data format, is initially laid out. And there's 4 sections to this chapter. One is the business requirements of the furnishers that are using it, Metro 2 training, programming standards, and production tips. Let's take a look. So if we go to Chapter 3, the business requirements. So this is basically where they're pitching to the data furnishers, why it's a good idea as a business model to use Metro 2. Apart from the fact that it is the industry standard and required by the bureaus for the furnishers to use. This also has really good information to tie together Metro 2 as an industry standard with the credit bureau's maximum possible accuracy requirements. So let's go ahead and take a look. So the Metro 2 format was developed as a standard for the credit reporting industry to accomplish the following. Provide one standard computer layout to be used for reporting accurate, complete, and timely information. Again, here we've got timely. Now notice it says one computer layout. What does this mean? Well, what this means is that when the data furnisher, let's just hypothetically say Capital One, puts the credit data in their computer and they hit submit, the identical information is submitted to all of the bureaus. So again, when you're making these disputes and you're arguing that the information is inaccurate because it is inconsistent, their own industry standard manual says that the information should be able to get laid out on a computer screen in one standard layout. Clearly, when we look at the credit bureau reports and they all look different, we can't really lay them out and compare Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion's trade lines because they all actually, in fact, look different. Again, it meets the requirements of all applicable federal and state laws, allows for reporting information at both the account and consumer levels, so they can report information about the underlying financial account, and they can also report information about the consumer, name, address, date of birth, social security number, and so forth. It allows for reporting the full 4-digit year. Okay. Metro 2 format was designed to allow reporting of the most accurate and complete information on the consumer's credit history. It is imperative that all accounts are reported a minimum of once per month so that they are reported with the final account status code when ultimately paid or closed. Remember, earlier, they also said that accurate, complete, and timely and monthly reporting is required. So it is not even just written in their industry standard manual once, but multiple times that the credit account information should be reported at least monthly. Here they go on further to say that the FCRA places significant responsibility on both the data furnishers and the consumer reporting agencies. How often do we get letters back from the credit bureaus and they play ping pong and they're like, oh well, talk to the furnisher, and then we get a letter back from the furnisher and they're like, oh well, we're not the credit bureau? Well, their own industry standard lays out very specifically that the FCRA places significant responsibility on both the furnishers and the CRAs. And then it goes on to state even more specifically that there's certain data fields in here that will assist you, which is the furnisher, in complying with federal and state legislation. Compliance condition code, the date of first delinquency, this is one that we do talk about quite frequently, the account type, the consumer information indicator, the ECOA code, is it a joint account, is it an individual account, is it a cosigner account, associated borrower information. Remember, the J1 segment is where they'll put in information for a co-buyer that has the same address. The J2 segment is where they put in information for a co-borrower or co-buyer that has a different address. And original creditor and creditor classification information. And it says even further to work closely with your compliance officers and programmers to ensure that these fields are reported accurately and are logical in relationship to each other. So they need to be reported. Date of first delinquency should be reported if applicable, and they should all be logical. All the things that we thought intuitively made sense, but we just couldn't figure out why the credit reports that we look at are so crazy. right here, their own industry standard manual gives us all of the ammunition that we need to be able to organize it and point right back to their own standard as the basis for our dispute. So again, we're looking at the business requirements, Metro 2 format here with Chapter 3. Their next little section, the return on the investment, so why should a furnisher use this? And then Metro 2 training, so they do have workshops, e-learning courses, webinars for the furnishers to learn how to use this. And then we've got a little section in Chapter 3 for the programming standards. There's basically two ways for the data to transfer from the furnisher to the credit bureaus. One is called a character format, another one is called a packed format. Don't really need to bog yourself down in these details, but that is what this is talking about. And then additional programming standards, and here they have a nice big, like its own little section. It says any deviation from these standards jeopardizes the integrity of the data. Okay, so again, you're getting all these nuggets of information that you can use to justify why the information is inaccurate. Production tips, what does this mean? Well, when they're producing the data, when they're out there typing into the credit computers, the furnishers are putting information in, here are some tips on how they should type the data in to make it maximum accuracy. And in the final section here of Chapter 3 is called record layouts. The record layouts is important because it goes back again and kind of lists conceptually. We talked about the book, with the book having different chapters. Each chapter is kind of a way to organize different segments or sections of data fields. One part of this just lays out again what are the different segments, and then it shows you the fields that are required to be reporting, which is important because if you look at a credit report, it's not just inaccurate but also incomplete information that you can dispute. So let's take a look here. So your record layouts. What is a record? You know, a computer, a data record, like when you pull up in your contact card, like let's say in Outlook, and you pull up somebody's contact, that is a record, right? Is a record piece of information on something specific. So how are the computer records laid out with their format? As we had pointed out originally when we went over the table of contents, you've got the header record. This identifies the reporter and the reporting period, so that basically the data furnisher and the time being reported. Your base segment, okay, this is the information about the account as it relates to the borrower, the primary borrower. The J1 segment, this is information as it relates to a co-borrower that lives at the same address. J2 segment is information as it relates to a co-borrower at a different address. K1 segment is all of your original creditor name information. K2 segment is where your purchase from and to information will be reported. K3 segment, if it's a mortgage, you're going to find certain mortgage information here. Your K4 segment, specialized payment information. Your L1 segment is if there is an account number or identifier number change. Your N1 segment is where the employment information for the borrower is reported. And your trailer record is similar to the header record in that it's just information that is transmitted with the data file to further help the computers recognize and know how to index and store this data when the bureaus receive it. So this is the initial part of your records layout in Chapter 3. And then if we go to the next few pages, it actually has a chart for each one of the segments. And remember, there was a character format and a packed format. Okay, so it's breaking down your segments, and then whether it's a character or packed format, and they give you certain information on these charts. Your data fields, which we're going to get to the data fields in Chapter 4. These are the actual names of the data fields that you're going to see on the reports. Is the information required? Okay, and there's a little legend down here in the bottom that shows why, yes, a data field is required to be reported, or A, if it's applicable. So in other words, you're not going to have like a charge-off date reporting on an account that was never charged off. These right 4 columns, you don't really have to focus on those at this point. This is really more for just the number, the length of the maximum length of the information that can populate their data fields, and the positioning and how it transfers, whether it's the character or packed format. So mostly you can disregard these 4 right columns. The left 3 though is where you're going to find the data field. So this would be your header record, field number 0. The field name is your block descriptor word. And is it a required field? Well, this one is only if applicable. So the rest of Chapter 3 basically breaks down all of your data fields. And again, these data fields are actually specifically defined in Chapter 4. But this shows you whether a field is a required field. Why this is important is, again, if you're looking at a credit report, a lot of times they will just give you the payment history, but they will not show you the historical information for a lot of the other fields that are required. Well, if a field is required, and as we've already established, this industry standard requires monthly reporting. If you do not have monthly reporting of a required field disclosed to you on your credit report, well, it is certainly, arguably, inaccurate on the basis that it is incomplete. So the takeaway for chapter number 3 is this, further coupled up with chapter 2, gives us ammunition to tie together Metro 2 format as the industry standard designed to conform to the law's requirement for maximum accuracy. And this last part here of the record layout of chapter 3 is where you will look at a report, and when you find things that you think are missing, cross-reference it with the chart here in chapter 3 to find out if a data field is in fact required to be reporting, but if it's not reporting.